almost 2 years since Battlefield 1 was released, on October 21st of 2016 to be exact. With 2 major AAAs on my front steps, I will no longer have time to play Battlefield 1 until Battlefield 5 comes out. So with a heavy heart, I have to say goodbye to this amazing game that kept me busy and happy for such a long time. I literally played this game every single day. And in order to make this official, I decided to make this video montage of Xbox clips I collected over all this time. This game was a blast from the beginning to the end. It started with an exciting alpha, then an even better beta, both of which got me hooked instantly. This was a pleasant surprise because, like so many other people, I was skeptic about this game at first, as I just could not picture how a World War I game could have enough content to be exciting. But boy was I wrong. DICE did it again. From the many authentic details to the sounds, the events and the great maps among a lot of fan favorites, it simply had it all. When the full game was released shortly after, I could not stop playing it even for a day. Unlike its predecessor, Battlefield 4, this game had very few issues. It simply ran like a Ferrari. And to this day, there's never a lack of full servers. I still vividly remember when I got this game in the mail, installed it, and how emotional I got when I started up the campaign, hearing the music for the first time. There it was, a new Battlefield game that would keep me busy for the next 2 years. Like in true fashion, I did not get into the multiplayer until I finished the campaign, which I enjoyed a lot. I loved the historical facts and the feeling of getting a glimpse of how life was back then, especially war. The simplicity of everything from the weapons to the vehicles. It was almost like you could smell the old buildings and the leather on the horses and the smoke coming from a distance. While most of us have lived while modern wars have been going on, none of us lived when World War I was happening between 1914 and 1918. While we hear and see a lot about World War II through movies and documentaries, we really rarely hear or see anything about World War I, and thus most of us know very little about it. So to me, it felt very special imagining myself at that time, how it must have felt and how gruesome that war really was. When the First World War began that summer, most people thought it would be over by Christmas. Many believed that Britain was so powerful it could win very quickly. In fact, the First World War lasted 4 terrible years, not 4 months. Soldiers in the trenches would spend their days doing chores, firing at the enemy, playing cards and writing letters home. Incredibly, 9 out of 10 men survived. And did you know that this was the war where during Christmas 1914 some German and British soldiers agreed to stop fighting each other for a day or two? They chatted, sang and even played football together. There is actually a really good movie about this, but a lot of people don't even know that this was in World War I. By the winter of 1915, the opposing sides had both dug long ditches called trenches, which faced each other, in some places just 30 meters apart. These lines of narrow trenches stretched from the Belgian coast to Switzerland and were known as the Western Front. Over 5 million British soldiers spent time living in those muddy, miserable ditches, taking turns to be on the front line, the trench closest to the enemy. And when you play this game, you find yourself a lot in trenches and around the trenches, jumping over trenches, running inside trenches. because that's really what this war was mostly about. And I heard that there wasn't really any fights going on in cities and villages. They were really all out in the wide open in the fields, in trenches. But of course, DICE had to add some city and village fights to it just to make the game more interesting. And I have to admit, I'm a sucker for close quarter fights. I just love it. To me, it's nice when a game is very accurate, but it doesn't have to be 100% historically correct, because it makes total sense that a game also has to be fun. And if it's so accurate that it's not fun anymore, then nobody really wants to play it. So DICE just did the right thing of finding a nice middle ground between historical accuracy and fun. And what they did really well in the game is just how you just feel how dirty and grim that time was. You can even see the dirt on your guns many times when you just run through some mud, which is just something that I just find very amazing how they did that. So day-to-day life in that war was smelly and grim. There were millions of giant rats, overflowing latrines, and terrible lice infestations, not to mention the dead bodies. Every so often, soldiers on the front line would be instructed to leave their trench and venture into dangerous no man's land to try to push back the enemy. This war was very different from conflicts of the past. For the first time, powerful new weapons and vehicles were used at sea, on land, and in the air, resulting in many people being killed or wounded. In Britain, you could sometimes hear what sounded like thunder coming from across the English Channel from Europe. In fact, it was the huge boom of big guns called artillery being fired on the Western Front. 75% of all men who died in World War I were killed by artillery. Just imagine that. The largest battle of World War I, the Battle of Somme, is known as one of the bloodiest battles in history. It was fought by the French and British against the Germans on both sides of the River Somme in France, and lasted for more than 5 months. Over 1 million men were killed or wounded, and it was the first time that a tank was used in combat. And in this game, you can actually play the map called River Somme, which is exactly about this big battle. And it's kind of interesting to be there and see and just imagine how gruesome that battle was. And River Somme actually is one of my favorite maps. Unfortunately, it just doesn't come up as much because a lot of people didn't buy the DLC. And if you happen to play this game and you can get your hands on the DLC for cheap or for free, I highly recommend you at least try it out. It's really a great map. And what I also really liked so much about this game was the fact that you could ride horses, and the horses are super realistic. There's a few things that, you know, when horses don't react the way they would in real life, but you quickly forget about it because they're just so much fun to use. And they're also very powerful because if you're on the receiving end, you start hating the horses and you try to find ways to take them down. And one way to take them down are tripwires, usually 2 of them, or you simply just throw some explosives at them. Almost 1 million horses were involved in the war. Soldiers on horseback were known as the cavalry, and horses also pulled some of the gigantic guns, ambulances and supply wagons. Gas from horse droppings could even be used to power lamps. Imagine that. And DICE also put in this fun game mode called War Pigeons, because pet pigeons were drafted in to carry messages over long distances, often carrying news from the front line back to Britain. And last but not least, there was this humongous zeppelin that you saw often in some of the maps flying over you when the enemy team was losing, and then it came crashing down in a huge fireball, and if you were unlucky, it landed on top of you and killed you and everyone around you. And that was a scenario that you just never got tired of watching. With that, I say goodbye to you, Battlefield 1, and thanks for a fun 2 years. I will definitely never forget you and maybe even come back to you again.